Every morning before class, Lila Dawson, a poor college student barely holding on to her scholarship, sat on the cracked stone bench beside the bus stop, clutching a worn-out textbook and a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. And every morning she noticed him, the beggar who sat quietly by the curb, his clothes torn, his beard untrimmed, and his hands trembling as he drew shaky circles in the dust. No one looked twice at him, but Lila did. Something in his silence pulled her closer. Something in his tired eyes made her heartbeat stumble. She started bringing him food, a little conversation, and one day, without meaning to, her heart. She thought she was falling for a beggar, a man with nothing. But when he suddenly disappeared, only to reappear days later in a sleek black car outside her campus, everything she thought she knew shattered. Who really was this man? Why did a billionaire hide behind torn clothes? And what would happen when he took her home, where secrets were worth more than love itself? The morning fog hung low over Brookside Avenue, wrapping the cracked sidewalks in silver mist. The air was sharp enough to sting, but Lila Dawson had long stopped caring about the cold. Her life revolved around routine, lectures, work shifts, and silence. She had learned to stretch $1 into $2, skip breakfast to save for rent, and smile even when exhaustion clung to her bones. Poverty had a way of teaching you gratitude for the smallest. Warmth, like the soft steam rising from the cup of soup she carried in her hands. At the edge of the bus stop sat the same figure she'd seen for weeks now, the beggar. No one knew his name. His wheelchair looked as though it had been forgotten by time. One wheel slightly bent, one armrest cracked. His coat was layered with grime, his fingers calloused and pale. People passed him like he didn't exist, their eyes flicking away, afraid his need might stain their conscience. But Lila couldn't. Not when she looked into those eyes. Blue, but dimmed by something she couldn't name. There was sorrow there, yes, but also patience, a quiet dignity that didn't belong to someone who begged. It made no sense. He never asked for money, never spoke unless spoken to, never even extended his hand. He simply sat as if waiting for something that wasn't coming. She handed him the cup. "Soup again," she said softly. "Not much, but it's hot." He looked up slowly, his lips trembling into a faint smile. "Thank you," he murmured. His voice was rough but kind, the kind of voice that carried warmth even in broken syllables. Lila smiled back. "You always say that like it means more than it should." "It does," he whispered. "Kindness is rare." For a moment neither spoke. Cars hissed by. Buses coughed smoke into the air, and the city continued its indifference. Lila sat on the curb beside him, hugging her knees, and wondered why a stranger's presence felt safer than most people she knew. She didn't know that behind his unshaven face and ragged clothes hid a secret larger than her world could imagine. Her mind often drifted to her past, and to her, mother's worn hands folding laundry late into the night, to her father's silent departure when bills outnumbered hope. She'd promised herself she'd break the cycle, finish college, become someone who didn't have to count coins before buying bread. But lately even dreams felt like luxuries she couldn't afford. "Why do you always come here?" she asked one day, breaking the silence. He tilted his head slightly. "Because here no one expects me to be anything else." Something in his tone lingered, too heavy, too thoughtful for a man living on the street. Lila frowned. "You talk like you used to be." "Someone else, maybe I was," he said, his gaze distant. "Maybe I still am." She laughed softly, thinking he was teasing. But he didn't laugh back. That night, she lay awake in her small dorm room, replaying their conversation. There was something about him that didn't add up. His hands, not the hands of a man who'd lived long on the streets. His posture, straight, controlled, almost disciplined. Even his silence carried purpose, like someone used to listening more than speaking. Still, she couldn't stop going back. Day after day, she brought him leftovers, coffee, sometimes just company. They talked about everything except themselves. He never told her his name, so she gave him one. "Eli," she said one morning. "You look like an Eli." He chuckled, the first real laugh she'd heard from him. "Eli, I haven't heard that in years. So that is your name?" "Maybe," he said with a small, unreadable smile, and somehow that was enough for her. Weeks passed. Winter deepened. The city prepared for Christmas, glittering with lights that mocked the hungry and the forgotten. Lila saved what little she could to buy him a proper coat. She wanted to see him warm, to see him smile again. But when she arrived the next morning, the bench was empty. The wheelchair was gone. The corner where he sat every day, empty. Her heart sank. She asked around, but no one had seen him. The streets swallowed people like shadows. For 3 days she searched, skipping class, skipping meals, asking every vendor, every driver, every officer she passed. Nothing. He had vanished as if he never existed. By the 4th day, Lila stopped trying to understand. Maybe he had moved on. Maybe he had died. The thought made her stomach twist. She sat alone at the bus stop, clutching the coat she'd bought him with trembling hands. Then a horn sounded behind her. She turned. A sleek black car, tinted windows, engine humming softly, rolled to a stop beside her. Her reflection stared back in disbelief. The window lowered. A familiar pair of blue eyes met hers, but they weren't dim anymore. They were sharp, alive, commanding. He wasn't dressed in rags now, but in a tailored suit that whispered money. "Lila," he said quietly. "Get in." Her world froze. Her beggar, Eli, was gone. In his place sat someone else entirely. A man who looked like he owned everything she'd ever dreamed of. Lila didn't move. The cold wind brushed her hair across her face as she stood frozen by the curb, staring at the man who was both familiar and impossible. His blue eyes held the same warmth she'd seen in the beggar's, but now they glimmered with power. Sharp, knowing, unrestrained. Her lips parted, but no sound came. "Lila," he repeated, his voice softer now. "Please get in." Something inside her trembled. She wanted to ask who he really was, how this was possible, why he looked like he'd stepped out of another life. But his tone carried a strange authority. Not commanding, but weighted with something deeper. She found herself obeying. As she slid into the car, the scent of leather and cedar surrounded her. Clean, elegant, expensive. It was a world apart from the dust and noise of the street. Her pulse raced as the car eased forward, gliding through the city lights like a dream. He didn't speak at first. Neither did she. The silence between them was thick, loaded. Finally, she turned to him. "Who are you?" He kept his eyes on the road. "Someone who forgot who he was. Until you reminded me." "That's not an answer," he exhaled. "My name is Elias Ward." The name struck something, faint recognition. Lila frowned. "That name sounds familiar." "It should," he said quietly. "My family owns Ward Industries." Her eyes widened. Ward Industries, one of the largest private companies in the state. She'd seen the name printed on construction sites, skyscrapers, even on the scholarship fund that partially paid for her tuition. Her breath caught. You're that Ward?" He nodded, gaze steady on the road. "Was until I walked away." Her heart thundered. "You walked away from all that?" "I did," he said simply. "After my parents died, the company became a battlefield. Money turned blood into strangers. I didn't recognize myself anymore. So I left. No one knew where I went. I needed to see who I was without everything that was supposed to define me." She stared at him, her mind spinning. The beggar she'd fed soup to, the man she'd pitied, was a billionaire hiding from his own world. Every image of him sitting in that torn coat, quiet by the bus stop, crashed against the one before her now. Polished, composed, untouchable. But why pretend to be a beggar? She asked, voice shaking. You could have gone anywhere, done anything. He finally looked at her. Because no one lies to a beggar, Lila. People show who they really are when they think you have nothing to give. And you? His gaze softened. You saw me when I was invisible. The words hit her deeper than she expected. She turned to the window, watching the blur of streetlights. Part of her wanted to cry, not from anger, but from the ache of being fooled and cherished all at once. Were you testing me? She asked, barely above a whisper. No, he said. I was finding myself. You were the only honest thing I found. They drove for miles in silence until the city thinned into the outskirts. Then she saw it. A massive wrought iron gate looming ahead, opening slowly as the car approached. Beyond it stretched a mansion, vast and glowing under the moonlight. Marble steps, glass towers, manicured gardens stretching into the horizon. Her throat tightened. She'd never seen such wealth up close. The car stopped at the entrance. He stepped out first, walked around, and opened her door. She hesitated before stepping out, her shoes sinking into the velvet gravel. Eli, she said softly, using the only name that felt real. Why bring me here? He looked down, almost as if he didn't know how to answer. Because I wanted you to see the truth before you decided who I am. The front doors opened. 2 house staff members appeared, bowing slightly. The sight made Lila uneasy. The air felt heavy, distant from everything that was warm or human. Inside, chandeliers spilled golden light onto marble floors. Paintings lined the walls, portraits of powerful faces that all shared his sharp blue eyes. She felt out of place instantly, her thrift store coat clashing with the gleam of wealth. "Does anyone know?" she whispered. "That you lived on the streets?" He shook his head. "No one. Until now." Her eyes caught a framed photograph on a side table. Elias standing beside a woman with the same piercing eyes, her smile flawless but cold. "Your mother?" He nodded. "She built the empire. I inherited her strength and her enemies." Lila touched the photo gently, her voice trembling. "You must have loved her," he paused. "I did. But she loved control more than she loved people." There was pain in his tone, quiet, buried, real. For the first time since stepping into the mansion, Lila saw not the billionaire, not the beggar, but the man in between, torn between worlds that never understood each other. He turned to her then, closer than before. "You showed me kindness when I was nothing. You gave me warmth without knowing who I was. You don't owe me anything, Lila, but I needed you to know." Her eyes met his. "You think money changes what I saw in you?" He smiled faintly. "I think money changes everything, even the truth." The words hung in the air, heavy, uncertain, and though Lila wanted to believe nothing could change what she felt, a quiet fear began to grow inside her. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure who she was in his world, a girl he cared for or a secret he'd eventually have to hide. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, a warning in the night. The next morning, sunlight poured through sheer curtains, cutting across the marble floors like gold threads. Lila awoke in a guest room larger than her entire apartment. A glass chandelier hung overhead, and the sheets beneath her were softer than any fabric she'd ever touched. She should have felt awe, wonder, even gratitude, but instead unease settled in her chest like a stone. This wasn't her world. It wasn't even close. A knock came on the door. "Miss Dawson?" A woman's voice called. "Mr. Ward requests your presence at breakfast." She rose slowly, smoothed her hair, and stared at herself in the ornate mirror. The reflection didn't look like the girl who used to walk through fog to class with a cup of soup. This version looked borrowed, out of place. When she entered the dining room, Elias was already seated at a long oak table that could have hosted 20 people. He wore a crisp white shirt, no jacket, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The morning light caught the gold in his hair. He smiled when he saw her. "Good morning." Lila hesitated. "Good morning." "Mr. Ward." His smile faded a little. "You don't have to call me that." She sat opposite him. The table was lined with dishes she didn't recognize. Fresh berries, eggs, pastries glistening with honey. She picked at a croissant, trying to ignore the tension creeping up her spine. "Sleep okay?" he asked. "Too well," she said softly. Almost felt like someone else's dream. He studied her for a moment. "You don't have to be anyone else here, Lila." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Don't I?" Before he could answer, a woman's voice cut sharply through the room. "I thought you were joking, Elias." Lila turned. Standing in the doorway was a woman draped in elegance. Sleek black hair, red lips, eyes sharp as glass. Her heels clicked against the marble as she entered. Elias's jaw tightened. "Ava," he said flatly. "You weren't invited." The woman, Ava Ward, Lila realized, gave a cold smile. "You bring a stranger into the house and I'm the one not invited?" Lila's stomach twisted. Elias stood, his posture suddenly guarded. "She's not a stranger." "Oh?" Ava's eyes swept over Lila, from her simple dress to her trembling hands. "She looks like one. Or maybe just someone who wandered too far from her world." "Ava," Elias said, voice low with warning. But Ava wasn't done. "You think this," she gestured toward Lila, "will end differently from the last time you tried to save someone beneath you? You can't erase where you come from, brother. And she can't survive where we live." Lila blinked. "Brother." The word sliced through her shock. Ava wasn't some jealous ex, she was his sister. Elias exhaled slowly. "You don't know her?" Ava's eyes narrowed. "Neither do you." Then she turned to Lila, her tone sugar-sweet but cruel beneath. "You know what happens to people who fall for my brother, dear? They drown in things they can't afford. Secrets, expectations, shame. I'd leave before it gets ugly. Lila's chest ached. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against marble. I didn't come here for your approval. Ava smiled thinly. Good, you won't get it. Then she walked out, heels echoing like a gavel. Silence fell. Elias's hands tightened into fists. I'm sorry, he muttered. She has no right to. She's right about one thing, Lila interrupted softly. This isn't my world, he stepped closer, desperate. Lila, don't say that, her eyes shimmered with conflict. I've spent my whole life trying to escape the weight of not having enough. And you left a world with everything because it was too much. You see how upside down that is? Elias looked at her, words failing him. She turned away, walking toward the window where the garden stretched endlessly below. Workers trimmed roses, fountains sparkled. It was breathtaking and suffocating. You lived as a beggar to feel human again, she said. But I think you forgot. People like me live that way because we have no choice. He closed his eyes briefly, the truth of her words cutting deep. You're right, he said finally, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to understand what that means. When she faced him again, her expression softened. You don't have to understand, Elias, just don't make me part of your redemption story. He flinched, not from anger, but pain. That's not what this is. Then what is it? She asked, voice trembling. What are we? He took a step closer, reaching out. But before he could speak, a servant entered hurriedly. Sir, there's a call for you. From the board. Elias straightened, his face closing off. I'll take it in the study. As he left, Lila's gaze lingered on the empty space he'd occupied. She wanted to believe him, that what they shared wasn't bound by wealth or pity. But Ava's words echoed cruelly in her mind. You can't survive where we live. That night, she stood on the balcony outside her room, staring at the moonlight spilling over the endless estate. She thought of the soup she once brought him, the silence they shared, the comfort that needed no explanation. But now, everything had meaning. Too much meaning. Somewhere below, she saw him walking alone through the gardens, phone in hand, shoulders heavy. Even from afar, she could see the burden he carried, the war between who he was and who he wanted to be. And though her heart ached for him, a quiet voice whispered inside her, maybe love isn't enough when the world you're entering was never meant to welcome you. The wind rustled the trees, carrying a chill that felt like a warning. Something was coming, something that would test everything they had just begun to understand. The next evening, the mansion was alive with sound, laughter, music, and the muted clink of crystal. From the balcony of her guest room, Lila watched luxury swirl below like a dream painted in gold. Dozens of guests mingled under chandeliers, faces sharp with confidence, words dipped in charm. She felt invisible among them, a ghost in borrowed clothes. Elias had told her it was just a small family gathering. It looked more like a royal gala. When he appeared at her door, dressed in a midnight blue suit that fit him like a secret, she forgot how to breathe. He looked nothing like the man from the bus stop, and yet when he smiled at her, she saw the same kindness that had first undone her. You don't have to do this, she whispered. I do, he said softly. You stood beside me when I had nothing. Tonight I stand beside you, no masks. He offered his hand. She took it. Together they descended the marble staircase into a sea of eyes. The whispers began instantly. Who is she? She looks out of place. Another charity case? Lila felt every word like glass against her skin, but Elias's hand didn't waver. He led her straight to the long dining table where a portrait of his late parents loomed behind crystal candles. At the head sat Ava, poised like a queen ready for battle. Well, Ava said, raising her glass. The prodigal brother returns, and with company. Elias ignored the jab. Everyone, this is Lila Dawson. Silence followed. Lila forced a polite smile, though her heart pounded like thunder. Lila, Elias continued, is the reason I came home. The words hit the room like a spark in dry wood. Conversation stopped. A few guests exchanged glances. Ava's expression froze. The reason? Ava said slowly. Do enlighten us. Elias looked around the table. You all worship what this house represents, power, control, perfection. But I lost myself in it. I left to remember what being human meant. I found it again. When a girl with nothing shared her warmth with a man she thought was no one. Gasps rippled. Lila wanted to disappear. Ava laughed, and sharp, humorless. So that's what this is. A performance. Do you think bringing a poor student here will prove your moral resurrection? Ava, Elias said tightly. Stop. But Ava rose, eyes glinting. No, brother. Let's tell her the truth before you sell her the fantasy. Lila's blood ran cold. What truth? Ava turned to her, voice soft but venomous. He didn't just walk away, dear. He was forced out. After an accident. One that killed 2 workers at a Ward construction site. The company covered it up to protect him. His guilt sent him running. Elias's face drained of color. Enough, but Ava pressed on. He sat by that bus stop because it was across the street from where it happened. Every morning he watched the place where he destroyed lives. You didn't save him, Lila. You were his penance. The room fell into stunned silence. Lila stared at Elias, breathless. Is it true? His jaw trembled. It was an accident. The foundation was faulty, I didn't know. But yes, it's true, tears burned her eyes. The man she'd thought she'd healed was haunted by something far darker. Ava smirked. You see, brother, even your redemption story is built on ruin. Elias turned to her, eyes blazing. That's enough, Ava. He slammed his glass down, shattering it. I made a mistake, and one I'll pay for the rest of my life. But don't you dare use her to twist it. He faced Lila then, the room fading away. I never meant to deceive you. I wanted you to see who I really was before you learned what I'd done. Lila's voice broke. You hid behind your pain and I fell in love with it. I hid, he said, stepping closer. But you found me. You showed me I could still feel like a man, not a monster. The guest murmured, uneasy. Ava watched with cold satisfaction, certain Lila would walk away. But Lila's tears glistened as she whispered, You can't fix the past, Elias. But maybe you can live differently from it. He stared at her, hope flickering through the ruin. If you'll stay, she hesitated, heart twisting between fear and love. I'll stay, she said at last, if you stop running. For the first time he smiled, not the smile of a billionaire or a beggar, but of a man finally at peace. He turned to the stunned crowd. You all wanted the air back, he said. Well, here I am, but not the way you remember. This house will change starting tonight. The company will reopen every file, pay every debt, rebuild what was broken. No more pretending, a hush spread. Somewhere at the end of the table, a single guest began to clap, then another and another. Ava's composure cracked, her glare trembling with disbelief. Lila reached for Elias's hand. His fingers closed around hers with quiet certainty. In that moment, the noise, the wealth, the judgment, and all of it blurred. There was only them. Later, after the guests had gone and the house fell silent, they stood together in the courtyard. The night air was cool, fragrant with roses. You took me home, Lila whispered. And it really did shock everyone, he smiled faintly. Including you, especially me. He laughed, low, unguarded, and she leaned into him. The lights from the mansion flickered across the fountains, casting ripples of gold over their faces. He pressed his forehead to hers. I don't know what happens next. Then we start small, she said softly. Tomorrow we go back to that bus stop together. He nodded, eyes wet with relief. Together. As dawn broke over the estate, the beggar and the poor student stood side by side, 2 souls who'd met at rock bottom, now standing where the world could finally see them. Not as billionaire and charity, not as guilt and grace, but as equals. And somewhere deep inside the grand echoing house, Ava watched from the window, her reflection caught between envy and admiration. For the first time, even she couldn't tell which one she felt more. Outside, the first sunlight touched their faces, and in that fragile light, everything that once divided them began, quietly, beautifully, to heal.